Oh, man. Big
All right, well, Coach, where are you from? Where's home?
Tulsa's home. I was
Okay.
born in Pensacola, Florida. My dad was still in the Marine Corps
Ah,
and got a medical discharge, and my mom's from Ada, Oklahoma. And so when he got out and they were looking to relocate, my mom had a sister living in Tulsa, and that was 1976, and here we are.
I like how you made it sound ancient. 1976.
That's right.
I catch myself calling this the new millennium still, even though we're more than 2 decades in.
Yes.
How crazy is that? So I would ask you, was there a big adjustment between Florida and Tulsa? But it sounds like Oklahoma's all you really know, right?
I wouldn't know any better. We moved here when I was less than 1.
Mm.
And, so the east side of Tulsa, 41st and Mingo, that's home. I'm an east sider.
For sure. Any siblings?
Oh, yeah. I've got an older sister, Brooke, who graduated from Booker T.
Mm.
And she's lived in Tennessee now for 20 years. And then I've got a younger brother, Josh, who was with me at Hale. And he's a special agent in the FBI living here in town. So I got one on each side.
Man, listen, y'all might be the most interesting family in America, man.
Well,
depending on
he
where.
may be watching us right now. I don't know.
Yeah, we're gonna keep everything. We're gonna keep everything square. But we've been on a little bit of a spree here, unintentionally, in terms of our guests. We've had a bunch of middle children.
There we go.
How was your recollection of being the middle child? Is it true what they say? How rough y'all get
I
it?
think I was actually the anomaly. I was the one afraid to get in trouble.
Mm.
I was my siblings would tell you I was the pleaser. They would label me the golden child, like you're not going to, mom and dad aren't ever going to get fussy with you. But I was the pleaser, and I was afraid to get in trouble.
Mm.
My sister did things and taught me maybe what not to do certain times, and I tried to lay a better example for my brother. But no, I was not the typical middle child.
Can you think of one instance where you really I really stepped in at this time?
Probably any time where the truth was not spoken. My father and mother, who's a career teacher, my mom, and we can get through anything, but you better be honest. And so if I started going down a path where the whole truth wasn't being communicated, it was on. And back then, it was on.
It was on.
Yes.
On. It's wild, like when you say back then, because I was having a conversation with one of my good friends here recently, and I'm like, I think that maybe not everything that was used back then should translate to today, but nothing is an overcorrection. Like some of that stuff still works today if we use it.
Oh, I agree. Growing up the son of a Marine, it was sir and ma'am and please and thank you. And I never knew how much that would help me later on in life, going through interviews or talking to adults or whatever, but just using common courtesy to no matter what. I remember my dad telling me that when I was at Fulton Elementary School, you will say sir and ma'am, whether it's the principal or the custodian. I mean, these are your adults, and you'll respect them, and that's how we were brought up.
Man, I love that right there. So if you had to pick one parent that you were, I guess, partial, for lack of a better word, partial to over the other, which one would you be? This is coming from a daddy's boy.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, most would probably say mom and I were tighter.
Yeah.
My dad and my brother were real tight. My brother always had an interest in guns and military like my dad and aviation. My dad was a helicopter pilot.
Man.
And I just wanted a ball. I didn't care if it was football, basketball, whatever. I wasn't into toys or cartoons. I just wanted to be outside. And my mom's dad, my granddad on my mom's side, was a college basketball player in the late 30s at East Central and Ada.
Hey.
And so mom and I just always bonded through sports. We could sit around and watch sports all day.
I love that. Well, last family question. With you having a younger brother and having an older sister, would you say y'all were pretty tight growing up?
I think the older we got, we became tighter. My brother and I, especially as our sister went off to college, and it was just the two of us in the house. But growing up, we shared a room. My sister had her own room, and Josh and I shared a room till I was probably 17, and so we were pretty tight.
Y'all got real acquainted.
You bet.
I love that. So when did the beginning of your sports background begin, and which sport was it?
All of them. I think the first sport was probably soccer.
Okay.
Growing up and playing soccer, then basketball. And I remember begging my parents to let me do baseball in the spring, and they just said, nope, because we're not going to do soccer and baseball at the same time. Just going to be tough. And so when they finally let me do that, I thought, man, I've made it. I can do both. And as a parent now, you wonder how in the world they did it. You're driving in the car on Saturday, changing uniforms en route.
Shoving food down
there you go, grabbing something. And then I was allowed to play football starting in 6th grade. So a little bit later than what they're doing nowadays, but I got to play football for the first time going into middle school at Skelly.
What is it about the 6th grade, man? Because my mother put the same stipulation on me. When I really wanted to play football, I was a 5th grader, and all my buddies were playing, and they were teasing me for punking out basically. But I'm like, guys, it wasn't my decision. And my mother, she was adamant. She said, nope, 6th grade. And I'm looking at my dad like, hey man, a little help here.
Yeah, that's
he said,
right.
hey, she's spoken. And then she waited me out, I guess, because once it became my choice, I'm like, I think I'll stay in the gym.
That's right. Yeah, I don't know what it is about middle school, but my folks just always thought anything younger was maybe a little too dangerous. I don't know. You go from 5th to 6th grade. Now you get a little tougher. I sure didn't. But,
me neither.
But that's when I got to put on the pads.
I hear that. Now, which of those sports did you take off the quickest in? Were you pretty good early in any of them, or were you a project?
Soccer came easy to me. And I, my parents, they said, we'll give you $1 a goal. And I said, it's on. And so I became really motivated. I was a left-handed pitcher, which wasn't very smart. That was a sport that I gave up after my sophomore year, being a tall lefty. But basketball is what I wanted to do.
Always
in the driveway with a ball. Fairly good at football. I went to TU on a football scholarship for 2 years. So had a chance to do that. But basketball, when it came to a want to and a drive to get better, it was with a basketball.
So you would say you put the most time in on developing your basketball game over the rest?
No doubt about it.
Okay.
No doubt about it.
Were you pretty self-motivated, or did you have to be pushed at any point coming up?
I would think I was pretty self-motivated. Now, I look back, and if I analyze myself now, I think I was kind of fair weather. It's easy to be self-motivated when you're having a good day and the weather's nice and you and your girlfriend are getting along, all those things. But can you be motivated when you didn't do well on a test, or you and your parents aren't getting along? And so I think I learned to do that as I got older, but I always had a drive to get better.
I love that. So skipping a couple chapters, when you got to high school, you played at Nathan Hale High School,
That's
correct?
Hell yes.
I love that, man, because I'm pretty close to one of your former teammates who speaks pretty highly of you. A fellow by the name of Sidney Carter. You may be familiar with him.
Never met a shot he didn't like, man.
Never.
That's
to this day. I'm like, swing it. I guess it's going up. So talk about your experience in high school and playing for such a legend.
I loved Hale. I loved the East Side. I was very thankful. And there was just a lot of pride, a lot of working class people that were coming from the same background. And, Hale at that time was in the largest classification. And so in football, we were playing the Jinx and Unions and those things. And we were actually in the Frontier Conference when I was at Nathan Hale. We were the only TPS school not in the Green Country back then. And so,
would that have made y'all the largest school in the district at that time?
At that time,
okay.
At that time, absolutely. And so, there was always just a drive to put Hale on the map. They had such a great tradition in the '60s and '70s and part of the '80s, and then it just kind of sliding down with wins and championships. And so, getting to the playoffs in football was a huge deal. Getting to the state tournament in basketball was a huge deal, but I loved being a Hale Ranger and was thankful that I was.
Yeah. Now, what position did you play on that football field, man?
I'd catch the ball. They'd split me out. I was a tall wide receiver, a very average speed at best, not a burner, but I could catch the ball a little bit and had fun doing it.
There you go. You remember some of your teammames from that era?
On Hale?
Oh yeah.
Gosh.
Some names that folks might recognize?
Yeah, just guys, Taiwan Shanks,
the
basketball
familiar.
court, Michael Littlejohn, Brian Henderson. Guys Sidney Carter, who you mentioned, who really didn't come out till like his sophomore, junior year. He was a late bloomer, and Coach Clark had met him in PE class. He had him in class, and then guys that I grew up with, Chris Smith, Clint Johnson, and myself had played together forever. So it was a neat senior group that we had.
Beautiful. What's your recollection of your interactions with Coach Clark and how he did business during that time?
Well, you learn to handle intensity.
Yeah.
And most would say that I took a little bit of that with me as I developed my own coaching style, but that stuff never bothered me. I just how a coach chose to communicate, whether it was by yelling and in your face, never bothered me. To me, it was just a motivator.
Mm-hmm.
It was, and as being like I said earlier, being a pleaser, that was okay. I got to do this right, and so it motivated me in a good way. And there's probably this show's probably not long enough to talk about some of the funny stories I have on Coach Clark, but he came to Hale and turned it pretty quick.
Mm-hmm.
I remember my freshman year we had won. They moved a bunch of us up, and I think we won 6 games as a varsity team. And then my junior year, we're in the state tournament, and that was Coach Clark and Coach Limes.
Danny
was on
Limes
staff at that time, and Coach Paul Duncan. The 3 of them really just got us to go to another level.
Would you say you found the passion to want to coach pretty early?
I think so.
Okay.
I always felt like I was going to coach, and then when I got to TU, it was broadcast journalism. I was going to be a sports guy,
Mm-hmm.
and when I transferred to Oklahoma Baptist to play basketball and worked under Coach Hoffman, I knew my calling, and I thought it was always coaching, and I kind of shied away from it, but then I went all in with getting that education degree.
I think that's such a cheat code. I'm telling my students on a day-to-day, yeah, you know what? I think maybe I don't want to say we've lied to them, but maybe we weren't all the way honest with them whenever we ask them, hey, what do you want to be when you grow up? And they don't necessarily have an answer because they haven't thought about it. And we tell them, oh, you have time. But time goes pretty fast, man. So
I'm telling you, man, look at all this gray on the top of mine. I used to be a young coach in the area, not anymore.
Time flies, man, especially when you're having fun.
Absolutely.
So I'm curious to know what your recruitment process was like, because when I was a senior in high school, I'm looking around, it's around prom time. And a lot of my peers are already signed, sealed, and delivered.
Yeah.
Jameer King, Nick Sidorkis, Derek Lewis, all those guys know what's next. And I'm looking around, twirling my thumbs. Yeah. And then, I sort of had to take what I could get.
Absolutely.
How was it for you?
I was very lucky. My basketball recruiting was much stronger than the recruiting in football. I had some offers at some high major schools, in basketball, but I went to the University of Tulsa thinking I might be able to do both, and I always had done both. And
did they lead you to believe that, or you just were thinking?
I thought that I might have a chance to, and it was back in the day of Charlie Ward at Florida State, and of course Bo Jackson is a little bit older, and Deion Sanders, and the only problem is I wasn't on their level. I said some big time names, and so. But I thought I was going to be able to and wanted to, and it just didn't work out. And basketball was always my love. When I decided to go to Tulsa on a football scholarship, I think it surprised a lot of people because, why aren't you at Ole Miss hooping, or why aren't you at Wichita State, or why aren't you got these really good options? What's going on? And so I want to give this 2-sport thing a shot, and didn't work out. And looking back now, how my life has evolved and how officiating got involved, I think I know why I went to the University of Tulsa, and hindsight's always 20/20, but the Lord had His hand in it, and I got the experiences of playing Division I football, and I think that's helped me as I've got into officiating and watched that journey take off.
Was anybody advising you going through that process of making such a decision, or was it just
Kelly?
you?
Coach Clark was awesome.
Okay.
We navigated so much together. My dad was not an athlete per se. He just said, I would ask him why. He just said I was too poor to do it. I grew up and just couldn't. I had to get a job and didn't have time for practices and whatnot. But so Coach Clark was really, really good on the athletic side,
Sure.
in terms of just trying to make a wise decision. My parents were awesome and had my back.
When you say things didn't work out at TU, was it a matter of you just flat out not being able to play both, or maybe you were not thriving as much at either one as you thought?
Well, I don't know if I was going to get to thrive in basketball. I went out there for about 12 days, and then I was on a football scholarship, and I think they just decided that with me being on their scholarship that maybe they wanted me in there full time in the weight room in the off season, and they had every right to, right?
Yeah.
I mean, they're giving me that opportunity, and I was a little tall, little skinny kid coming out, and the weight room would have been good to me, and it was that redshirt year, but I just the burning desire for basketball was still there, and I knew that if I wasn't going to get a chance to do it, that was just going to be hard for me and difficult for me. I had a great redshirt freshman year in football.
Mm-hmm.
Got to catch a lot of balls and had a role, but basketball was just in the blood.
You just won out.
Yes, sir.
So you said Oklahoma Baptist, right?
Mm-hmm.
How did the conversation start? Did you pick up the phone and say, "Hey, listen, I'm making cold calls. I'm ready to play," or did they stay on your bumper even throughout the time?
They had always said, listen, if we're going to be here, and they handled it the right way in high school. And when I told Coach Clark, I'm going to leave, and to go back then, this was a long time ago. The Division I schools that had recruited me said, "Hey, go JUCO, and then let's talk again." Well, I didn't want to go make a transition to make another transition. I had already been out of the game a year that I redshirted. Mm-hmm. Now I was going to be out the second year that, it wasn't going to work out staying at Tulsa. I wanted to play.
Yeah.
And so going to that level gave me immediate eligibility. And Coach Hoff had, like I said earlier, been Old Man High School. And so I set out that spring and was all in. But Coach Clark helped me navigate through that just with calling people that, hey, he's, going to get back on the court. And OBU took a chance on a guy that hadn't played in roughly 2 years.
I'm telling you. So by that time, you got relationships established and a little bit of a resume, man.
Without a doubt, and you fast forward a few years after, that's who I go and work for my first job was Coach Hoff down at Texas Pan American. So it's a guy that has impacted me greatly as a man, as a believer, as a coach. He's his footprints in my life.
That's big time, man. And I had a buddy of mine when I got my first job as a head coach. He was a wrestling coach at the school I was at, and he said, "Man, us as coaches, if you think about it, we're easily in the top 3 most influential people in our student athletes' lives, maybe even number 1." I'm like, "Dang." He said they listen to us in some ways that they don't listen to their parents. So
they spend a lot of time with us. The older they get, they spend more of their time with us than at home, right? Mm-hmm. And so we have a chance to really impact them positively or hopefully not, but maybe even negatively.
Yeah, unfortunately, there is this. That's the yin and the yang, right?
You got it.
So how good of a fit was it when you got to OBU? Did it take time for you to find your footing, or?
Oh, from day one, it was awesome.
You knew it was the right move.
It was awesome. I think where I had to grow up and learn was, as a high school player, you thought you were the show, mm-hmm. getting all the shots, scoring, all that, and one of the most humbling experiences I ever had was Coach Hoff called me in and just said, "Hey, I love our team and we can win a national championship." He said, "But for us to do that, you need to lead the nation in assists." And for a guy that scored in high school, I was like, "Assist, huh?" And, I was a big, tall point guard and all that stuff and always had a bit of a leadership mindset as a player. I wasn't afraid to talk. I wasn't afraid to encourage. I knew where everybody was supposed to be, one of those type guys. And it just, at that, something just clicked. And he would talk about servant leadership and humility and things that I really hadn't processed as a young man or especially as an athlete. But selling out to that selfless mindset and just what does it take for our team to be good. And heck, at that time, I was probably I was a starter for 4 years, but I wasn't the best player at all.
Neither year?
No, heck no. Oh, we had players that were way better than me every year. I just had to get them the ball and make sure they knew where to be and play my role. I'd guard, I'd get up in you, and I'd rebound, and I'd give the ball up. And so it was just learning what makes us go and having Coach drive me that way, which is what helped me.
A tall left-handed point guard.
You got it.
I'm telling you, man, that's a tough cover if you ask me. So how good were those teams during the OBU chapters?
Awesome.
Yeah?
Awesome. I was so fortunate. I was a part of a quarterfinal team in the national tournament. We made it to the national championship and lost. Man. And then Final Four team. So 3 of the 4 years we're in the thick of it. And that small college basketball was right on. I mean, when we would play Oklahoma City, it was just Coach Case would have just powerhouse Division I transfers every year. And so, starting for them, it would be like, transfer from Oklahoma State, transfer from Louisville, transfer from Kentucky, and,
Ooh, all on the front line.
Oh, baby. And then, but so that league was so good, and it was a fun time to be in it. The gyms were packed. If you weren't there by halftime of the girls' game, you weren't getting a seat. It was just a fun era of Oklahoma small college ball.
Man, and I just got some chills thinking about the way the atmospheres were pre-COVID.
Yeah,
you know what I'm saying?
No doubt about it.
And we're slowly getting them back.
We hope so.
And so, which season would you say was your best individually, by your standards, while you were at OBU?
My best individually? Well, this is a good point. I mean, the best stats I ever had individually was the year we didn't make it to the national tournament, right?
Ironic, right?
Irony, yeah. And so, You know, it was, but for the team that we had some injuries. We had some player leave at semester. So I did have to step it up, and I needed to score more than normal. But like my first year I was there, I was always hovering right around double digits,
Mm-hmm.
you know, anywhere from 9 to 11, 8 to 10. But, you know, led the nation in assists a couple years and steals. And I would guard, like, come on. I'll guard. I'm gonna put my body on you.
So you took coach's recipe literally. You went and led.
I wanted to win.
I love that, man.
I wanted to win.
So compare the physical rigors of a football grind as an athlete versus a basketball grind as an athlete. Because you got to experience them both at the most elite level,
you know,
below pro.
And in the early 90s, there weren't these restrictions on days, amount of two-a-days and all that. And I can remember that summer that I left or graduated Hale and was going into TU. You know, I had a week of two-a-days with just the freshmen, the new guys.
Yeah.
And then the veterans reported we had a week of two-a-days.
Oof.
You know, it was on. And I think mentally, you know, you're out there, especially in our state in August. You know, you better put on your big boy britches and get tough. And, you know, then you're having to play against DBs, you know, that are bigger, stronger, faster, throwing you around. Mm-hmm. You're having to block those guys, you know, in high school, receivers, you don't have to block. You just kind of fake it a little bit. You know, so I think it helped me really, really grow and get mentally tougher. You know, for basketball, it was more the conditioning side of things that you had to work through and overcome. But, you know, those two-a-days in August were tough.
Man, what did a full day in the life of a student athlete at the Division I level look like? And also, what did a full day look like once you got to OBU as a basketball player?
Sure. You know, it would start early at Tulsa. It would start early with breakfast, and they had you on, hey, we want you on so many calories. And
oh, whoa, I didn't know that part.
Got to put on some weight, and as you're trying to get stronger and bigger, and we would have practice in the morning, and then there would be film after and break it down. You'd have a little bit of time for lunch and nap, and you just, you know, no cell phones then. You just pray that alarm would go off when it was supposed to because you're dead tired.
Yeah.
And get back for film and meetings, position meetings, group meetings, offense, defense, and another round in the afternoon, and then film after. And then so you get back to your room after you've iced and done stuff, and it's like Groundhog Day.
You got to be ready to do it all over again the next day.
It's like, exactly. And at OBU, a little bit different, obviously, different level, different resources and facilities. So there wasn't as much demanding of time. But when you were in there, it was, you know, we were trying to win a championship.
Yeah. Everything becomes a little bit easier to digest when you approach it that way. Well, this is the goal. We're trying to win it. So we'll take it.
You either want to get after it or you don't.
Bottom line.
Yeah.
Okay, so when your run ended at OBU, was there a thought that, hey man, I still got some gas left in the tank. Let me see if I can play a little longer somewhere, somehow.
Yeah, a little bit. Coach had told me, you know, that the Utah Jazz had reached out and they loved my size, and they were talking about, you know, don't get too excited. They were talking about, you know, what type of camps they would get me to. There was a chance in Israel, but, you know, Shannon, my high school sweetie, and I, we were ready to get married, and we got married, and I was committed. I don't know, maybe I didn't have enough drive or oomph to say, all right, I'm going to see this thing through. I'll go play for whatever it takes. But I also knew I wanted to get my master's degree, and I was going to have a chance to be the GA at OBU. Mm-hmm. And we got married the year before my senior year, and played, and then was staying on as a GA. I was actually at OBU as a GA when Coach Hoffman got the job at Texas Pan American down in October. It was a weird time of year to get a job in September after the school year had begun. Yeah. So the desire to play, absolutely, but I also think I saw the big picture that my ceiling and how far that could be was probably coming down a little bit on me.
I got you. Isn't it crazy how the older we get, the more realistic we become?
That's right.
About what's really happening.
I'm not as good as I once thought I was. Yeah, no doubt.
And then your body's got mileage on you. I'm like, you're young for the earth.
That's right.
But in basketball life, ancient.
That's right.
Okay, so you take Coach Hoff takes the job, right? Yeah. And you come along with him?
He goes down to Texas Pan American. He got a Division I job. Doesn't happen very often from an NAIA school to Division I, and he takes that job, and I was fortunate enough to go with him as a full-time assistant, and Shannon and I moved down there, and we were there 2 years, and so as we began that process, we always just felt the Lord was leading us to high school coaching. Again, not knowing why per se, other than that's where we felt He was leading us. Again, looking back now at how this officiating thing has taken off, we can see why. But, I was a Division I assistant at 23. And so most people would say, what in the world
Not
are
a
you
GA.
doing? No. I got to go as one of the full-timers, and so my path was 10 or 12 years ahead, right? To be at that level. And so it was awesome. I got to coach the guards, and I did all of our scouting and those type things. And when I had that meeting with Coach that I felt like we were going to be looking to come back and get involved in high school, it was tough because he was a huge impactor of mine. And he tried, he was going to be supportive, but it's like, do you realize how far ahead you are of most people that want to do this, because, you're getting this opportunity now. And it was hard to leave. But, you go from a Division I assistant to be the head coach at Tecumseh High School, and I still thought it was the coolest thing ever, man.
Yeah, man. Oh, and what was wild is that Tecumseh is part of my journey as head coaching, man. So before we leave that Division I chapter, what was your role? What all were you responsible of before? You touched on a little bit of it, coaching the guards.
On the court, I worked with our guards. I handled all the scouting, so I had our scout team. We would always prepare the top guys with scouting. I did all of our travel for the staff and team. I was kind of the compliance guy. If we were giving them per diem, they had to come see me to sign for it. And, and as if you've been an assistant, other duties as assigned. Which can be a gamut of things. But mainly guard play and scouting in terms of basketball.
Did you ever run into difficulty finding that line between being relatable and being respected, with you being so close in age with those guys?
Without a doubt. And it was like, what is the line? Because there was we had a young man on our team who had served in the Air Force, and he was older than I was.
Man's man.
So I was 23-year-old coming right in, thinking my what don't stink.
That's
and
right.
I'm a Division I assistant, but there were guys there. Like I said, Kyle was older than me, and it was trying to find that balance. Yes, I want to be relatable, but how do I create that respect? And that you learn that day to day. You learn that through screwing up, and you learn that by being taught.
Gotcha. That's always an interesting one, because I think on one hand you're dealing with that dynamic, but on the other hand, you got that spry young energy, that vigor, ready to do it all.
At that time, Coach would have me get in there on the scout team every now and then. Back then when I thought I could still play a little bit.
For sure, And I'm pretty sure you let them know a few things too, didn't you?
Oh yeah, only if it went in.
Okay, so Tecumseh, was that your first gig as a head coach?
It was. I made the decision in July, and there was an opening, and I had some buddies who were actually on the staff right before I came, who I was at OBU with, John Markham and Sean Shank. Sean's now the head coach at Crossings Christian, who's doing unbelievable. And they were on staff at Tecumseh, and they got the Enid job. So they left to go to Enid and said, well, hey, this job's coming open. And Tecumseh hired me as a young guy. I was 26 when I got my first head job, and I was just there 1 year. It was an unbelievable job, unbelievable administration. Tom Wilsey, the superintendent, and
still the superintendent.
Yeah,
there.
Still there.
He was my soup.
Yes, and so grateful for the opportunity they gave me. And leaving there to go to Muskogee was tough, but loved everything about Tecumseh.
When you went, I think sometimes we can be strategic, and then other times things just happen. Were you planning on that being a short stint, or just
Not
kind of
at all?
Gotcha.
Had no idea. I knew that I was getting an opportunity to be a head coach. I got to hire an assistant of mine who was a buddy of mine from OBU, and so we thought we were, fat and happy and loving life. And
you unpacked the bags.
We were returning to where we had been for 4 years at OBU, right? So we were living in Shawnee, and playing at OBU probably helped me get that job. Them having some name recognition, and then obviously being a Division I assistant, I think helped me. But there's a lot to being a head coach that you don't know anything about. And I promise you, I was probably out-coached 99% of the time that year at Tecumseh. And a lot of learning and a great group of young men.
What type of team did y'all have that year?
We were a little over 500. Okay. I remember we were 14-12, and you're going to have to help me. You're going to have to help me. We won a district game. lost, I think, a regional game, whatever's next.
Yeah, that would have been
lost
right.
one loss. So we never made it, I think, to area. I know there's an extra step in 4A and below, and so we didn't get out of regionals.
Yeah, that's a tough task, man. If you really understand the landscape, which you do, if you lose one along the way, man, you better buckle up.
You bet.
Yeah, just to advance to the next round.
Right.
So, as a young head coach, I can remember being in those shoes, even though it was after you. Was it ever difficult for you to delegate responsibilities, or were you trying to do it all?
I thought I was very good with delegating certain aspects of the game. I've never had a problem with that, even, at Jinx for almost 20 years. I really believed in assistants needing to grow and having some ownership in whatever it is, whether it's inbounds calls or whatever. And so was I probably 10 foot tall and bulletproof? Yeah, right? Like, we're going to do it this way and this and this and this. But working with Chris, my assistant, was great, and he had some opportunity that I gave him, and actually he ended up going to Muskogee with me that next year. So delegating has never been a part of a problem for me, and I promise you, as I got into officiating, delegating became important and almost a necessity.
For sure. So talk about that Muskogee chapter, man. Well, you were there for just one as well, right?
1 year.
1 year. One and done, Clay. No,
that's it. I know. And I tell young guys, I mean, I was 2 years at Pan Am, 1 year at Tecumseh, had a chance to go to Muskogee, a 6A school, joining the Frontier, closer to Tulsa. My wife obviously is from Tulsa as well. And when they gave me the shot again, I was a young guy and went. And it was one of the best years I've ever had in coaching.
To this day?
To this day.
Huh.
I got so close with those young men. I still talk to half of them to this day.
That's awesome, man.
I knew when I got to Muskogee why the Lord led me to be a coach, because I was a dad. Even at 27, I was a dad to have those kids. And I struggled when I came here because I didn't know what void I was going to fill.
That makes perfect sense.
And so meeting with that group, they had won 7 games the year before, and we won 15 that year and lost in the game to go to state. We lost to Caleb Green at Memorial. Yeah, and
that's a hell of a squad there.
But it was an unbelievable year. And like I said, I still talk to those guys, and just the belief they had and the relationships and the bonding, and they'd come to the house and we'd hang out, and our daughter, we didn't have Chase yet, but Mackenzie was born, and they would just get out on the ground and play with her. And when I decided to come to Jinx, it was the toughest conversation I had to have at that point in my life, really. I mean, I'd only been working 4 or 5 years, but I was so tight with them, and it was not easy. And when, after the, meeting to let them know you're leaving, they're coming by the house, and just great. I mean, and those guys, think of this, those guys are now grown men.
Big grown men.
Grown men, married, kids, families, and the fact that I still can talk and text and be a part of their lives is awesome.
I think the best part about that story is it sounded, did I hear you correctly? They still will come over to the house and hang out with you and your family even after the conversation?
They would come by and we're like, what's up? You sure?
Yeah.
You sure? Come on, man. And
sounds like they were understanding as much as they could be.
It was hard. And I remember, as I stated earlier, Muskogee was in the Frontier. So my first year at Jinx, for every year I was at Jinx, we would always have to go back to Muskogee. And it was so hard to go back and see those young men, because we had a really good year and they were believing, they were all in, and to go back as the enemy, so to speak.
Yeah.
It was unique.
Did those fans let you have it?
Absolutely.
Oh yeah. Now the most important question is, did you beat them when you went back there the next year? Can you remember?
Oh yeah. Gosh, yeah. I was really lucky during my tenure at Jinx. That game was always big for me to have some good success against the Roughers. And so that helped.
I'll tell you what, man. My greatest mentor to this day, a gentleman by the name of Terry Scott. You may know him.
Yeah, everybody knows T. Scott.
He would always tell me, after the Muskogee chapter, he said, man, Jinx was always that he said that was the last one of the conference opponents that I was able to figure out, for lack of a better term. He said, man, it was just hard to beat them. He said, at best they would split. He said we would never they swept us a couple times, but we never swept them in conference play any year. So I just thought I'd let you know that, man.
That's nice, man. It's I found out here, we're gonna have to, every place you got to win a little differently.
Yeah.
And it took me, I think, a few years to figure out how I felt we could be successful here, not for a year, but how do we sustain it? And you better be tough, and you better be able to guard and be able to rebound in at this school and in our league, because Union was always going to be more athletic than us.
Gotcha.
Booker T's more athletic, Broken Arrow's more athletic, and those type of things. So how do we find a way to win?
And before, I can't wait to go there, but I want to ask you a philosophical question, or an experience question. I don't know. You, at a young age, seemed like you had some tough conversations. The one with one of your greatest influential people at Pan American, like, I'm leaving, and then having to talk to the squad at Tecumseh, hey, I'm leaving. Talk to the squad at Muskogee, hey, I'm leaving. And then we're going to gear up to talking about that state championship game that you ended up losing in. And you got to go and look at those crying faces and figure out something to say to them too, man. So how'd you do it?
I think if you're just genuine and authentic, that comes out.
Gotcha.
I knew, nor did I expect any of those conversations for people to be like, hey, great, good luck, get out of here, we're behind you. If you're doing things somewhat correctly, people are going to be upset or frustrated to see you leave. But trying to follow what we felt the Lord's will was, and what was genuinely where we felt led to be, I think was the driving force. And, Kelly Clark used to always say, you may not agree with me, but hopefully you'll respect me. And I remember just that coming to me. They may not agree with this decision to leave Division I to go to Tecumseh. They may not agree, but hopefully they'll respect it, that I've tried to handle it the right way. And I hope that they'll look at me and say, you gave us everything you had every day you were here. So that gave you a little bit of peace. And when you work through that, and then you get down in the trenches to wherever you're going, and now you're in the day-to-day grind, you can transition a little easier.
That's right. So how was that grind early on when you got to Jinx? Because now you've become synonymous with Jinx, or maybe Jinx synonymous with you, however you want to break it down.
It was hard.
Yeah.
It was hard. I felt, I replaced a really good coach in Scott Paddock. He was with Joe Holiday.
Yeah, he's one of the good ones, man.
And Scott was the head coach here and had success. And when they made the move to, open that position up, I think it stunned a lot of people. And I actually called Scott before getting involved, because I had known him from playing at Hale. He was an assistant at Jinx during that time. And so replacing somebody that you respect and who was good was hard. And then I think, again, for me, it was, what role do I have for these young men that I serve now? It was going to be a whole lot different than the role that I had at Muskogee, And I told Shannon, we've told this story before, I told her for probably the first year, like, I don't know if we made the right decision. This is tough, and I'm struggling to connect, and I don't know if I'm making an impact like I was at Muskogee and Tecumseh, and it was hard. But then I told myself, you got to get your arrogance out of the way, and they may not need you in this role, but they need you somehow. And what does that look like? And so, 500 the first year here, a little over 500 the second year here, and then in year 3 we're in the semis. We lose to Union in a close one with Derek Lewis in that group.
Yeah. Y'all had played each other 5. Was that the 5th
we
matchup?
We alternated. That was the problem.
Yeah.
They won, we won. They won, we won. And we led them for like 29 or 30 minutes of that last one in the semis, and they made a run in the 4th. And again, better coach, more seasoned coach probably would have helped Jinx hang on to that. But once we got there, and of course, you know how it is when you win, everybody's like, oh, he knows what he's doing.
Yeah.
I'm the same guy, I've learned, and then to be a part of the next 5 years in a row, getting there 6 in a row was awesome. Getting to the state tournament. I'm
gonna ask this question just because I have to, but I'm pretty sure I know the answer. Does it ever get old?
No. Winning, beating Broken Arrow to get to the state tournament last March was just as fun as getting there for my first time as a coach when we beat Union, oddly enough, in the area game.
Mm-hmm.
And then, of course, they beat us in the semis a week later.
Yeah. Talk about that Union Jinx rivalry. It doesn't just exist in football.
Right. I've been here, this is my 20th year at Jinx, right? And my wife's actually a Union grad. And so
when I
was at Hale, she was a Union girl, but there's just a healthy respect and rivalry. And I think it stems obviously from the showdowns that Coach Trim and Coach Blankenship had, and then it just blossomed from there. But I think the older with each year that I coached, the older I got, you just respect how hard it is to just win one of those games.
Yeah.
Rudy's done such a phenomenal job there, state championships, great teams, and he's such a great coach. I remember the first time we were able to beat him, which I think was that third year at Jinx. I think they swept us my first 2 years. You did feel like you accomplished something. Like this was a big deal. Like we finally got one. And then it became very competitive from that point on. But, whether it's like you mentioned, whether it's football, basketball, how many national merits do they have? There's always that competition no matter what arena you're in.
It's like 6A, and somebody good doesn't go every year.
Look at Broken Arrow last year.
That's right. They were loaded, from a personnel standpoint, and they had depth to go with it.
Yes, sir.
But then speaking specifically to the Frontier Valley Conference, you guys beat up on each other night in and night out, and you end up in the same tournaments 2 or 3 times a year. Man, what's that like? Well, better yet,
go ahead.
A more specific question, because I know you're very big on preparation. You do your homework, and your teams are always very composed and ready to go and play. But at some point, you just know each other. So at what point do you get to where it's like, look, guys, man, erase this board. Let's go. This is what we're going to do.
Yeah, that's funny because I think it changed as the last 10 years of coaching versus the first 10 or 15. It was, I think I began to emphasize more, technique and philosophy early on for those reasons. Like, we have a 30-minute shoot around to get ready for this team that we maybe haven't seen in the tournament. So we're not going to have an in-depth scouting report, but, principals are always going to, help you.
That's right.
Still believe in scouting. We still did a pretty thorough job with it. But, those principles that you hold your kids accountable to, I think are going to get you through those games where you've had less than 24 hours to rest, prepare, and play. But as you mentioned, 6A basketball, probably the last 10 or 12 years, holy cow. When I first got to Jinx, I would have said 5A was tougher. Deeper, a little more Memorial was going up and down. Booker T was going up and down between 5A and 6A.
Yep.
But my goodness, 6A basketball in the West has obviously exploded over there with basketball.
Mm-hmm.
It's tough. It is tough. And as you said, somebody very good doesn't get to the Final 8 each year, and you hope it's not you.
I'll tell you, as a fan, I can take myself out of coaching mode. I look forward to whatever that bracket looks like every year, man.
Yeah.
So I got about 3 more high school questions I
Sure.
want to ask you, and then we'll talk about something else. If you can think of one of your teams that underachieved, they're really good but just didn't quite get all the meat off the bone that you can go back to, which team, which year?
That would have been 2013. I felt like we had a good team. When you win 20 and don't get there, so that's hard. And you probably remember a kid by the name of Stephen Parker.
Absolutely.
Stud football player. He's bouncing around the league right now.
Mm-hmm.
Was also a good player for us. And I just struggled, I felt, to find the right combinations and chemistry with that group. TJ Washington was a freshman that year.
It's another stud.
Trying to work him in. When you got Steven, you had Connor Houston, you've got these players, and that was tough because there were teams that weren't as talented as that group that made it to state during that 6-year run. Just based off whatever, maybe luck, maybe the ball bounces your way,
right?
But that team always kind of still like, God, we had a great year, but if you don't get there, then people don't remember.
Yeah, it's like a dud. And
exactly.
The players feel the same way about that
Sure.
too.
I would think so, but that one comes to mind.
How good was that team, that 09 team that got to the state finals and got beat by Putnam City, man? Because has that been your only crack at it? Your only dance in the state championship game?
Loss,
yeah,
championship loss. So I was fortunate to be a part of everything but hoisting it up, and That's hard. I think the older I get, I can look back and have a greater perspective on it. It's still pretty good. But Jinx has never won a boys basketball state title. And so that pride and that maybe a little bit of that arrogance, you wanted to be a part of the first team to do it.
Yeah.
And we were close so many times, but that team was special. We had the athletic studs like Bryson Pope and Alex Ewings.
Yes, sir.
We had a floor general named Doug McKnight, who was maybe the toughest kid to ever put on a uniform here. And then we had two bigs that could both shoot it and were tough, and they could both stretch it. And so we had a mix. And you had Anthony Harris that came off the bench, came over from Memorial. Yeah. CJ Sidorkus, Nick's little brother.
Mm-hmm.
So we had a good
loaded
team.
Up, man.
And we started that year 18-0, and it was our first loss that year was at Ron D. Milam Fieldhouse in Muskogee. and I remember Coach Scott telling me after the game, because you want to be perfect, you want to get to 19, and he told me, he said, listen, he said, I know it stinks right now. He said, this is going to be the best thing that happened to your team this year. And at the time, I'm like, I don't know how to process that. We just gave up a lead and lost, but we needed that wake-up call. And Coach Scott obviously has been successful as anybody, and he's so wise. And I thanked him because we ended up playing them in the semis. Mm-hmm. He had turned that thing and taken it to another level. And he said, what did I tell you? I said, you're right, Coach. So going into that state championship game at 27-1 is a special year. And, part of me thinks, nothing to take away from Putnam City, but if Bryson doesn't break his toe, I would love to have played those guys again. Mm-hmm. You get Bryson, you got to have to stay healthy. And, when he broke his toe, I thought it's going to be tough and having to, work on his pain. And, and it was a really good game for a half. I think we were down 2 at half. And then Xavier opened up a can of whoop-hiney. And again,
lit the house
as a
on
younger
fire.
coach, probably, didn't do a good enough job of stopping the bleeding and adjusting. But it was hard because that team had it, and I did not have a speech prepared. I never do for the last game of the year speech, but special group of young men.
Yeah, you dang right. I got to lay eyes on that group, so I can attest to what you're saying. Last Jinx related question.
Sure.
You coaching your son, right? He just graduated last year in 2022, correct?
That's right.
How was it, man? And what I really want to know is, I learned from Derek Lewis Sr. that you're either too hard on yours when you coach them, or you're not hard enough on them.
Yeah.
And most people that I know is the first one.
Yeah.
How was that dynamic, you coaching your son?
It was awesome. I had stepped out of coaching for a couple of years when I got hired in the NFL, and when I had the chance to come back, Chase was going into the 8th grade, and so that probably gave me a little bit of motivation to try and, I bet we can try and make this work. And so I always told our staff, knowing me, I'm intense no matter what, or have that reputation, that you guys are going to need to love on him because I know I'm going to be whooping his tail. Mm-hmm. And, one of our assistants, Coach Calabrese, he has been an assistant here. Oh, gosh, he's the offensive coordinator in football, but we've been together since I got here in 2003. He came in 2005. He also had a son, so we would feed off of each other where, I could be the good cop for his son, and he would be the good cop for my son. Because, as you mentioned, we're hard, but I think where I had to learn was it's just as hard for them because no matter what they do, it's never going to be good enough. They got this because your dad's the coach.
Yep.
They won this award because your dad's the coach. They scored 25. Well, it's because he gets the most touches.
Mm-hmm. No getting away from it.
Thankfully, Chase could play.
Yeah.
Right? He could play. And I remember talking to Danny Hightower, who coached his boys. He said, Clay, it was awesome. Talked to Danny Limes. Clay, it was awesome.
Yeah.
And I talked to Conley Phipps. Clay, it was awesome. And Conley's the one that really challenged me. He said, now listen. He said, because Conley, man, I wish I had some of his looseness. Now, they let that thing fly.
Oh, yeah.
And he said, you're going to need to, you're going to need to give him a little bit more leash. Even though he's your son, you got to give him a little bit more leash because he's also one of your most talented players. Mm-hmm. And so hearing somebody else say that, and our staff was so good about, hey, coach, get him the ball. Like, you haven't gotten him the ball, get him the ball, talking about Chase. And so I think I struggled with that balance of what's best for him and what's best for the team. And when those don't marry, that's hard. But when it does marry, I've got to be tough enough and wise enough to say, okay, we'll get him the ball.
Mm-hmm.
You know, those type things. And so, you know, and then the impact that it could have at home. How does Shannon handle that? You know, my wife and his older sister, Mackenzie. And so I told him I watched a special on the Manning family, Archie and Peyton
and Eli.
And one thing I learned watching that was, and I heard Archie say, we had a rule that we didn't talk football at home unless the boys brought it up. And I just told Chase that. I said, listen, when we leave this court, you know, if you want to talk hoops, we'll talk hoops. But we're going home. That's it. We're going home. And if you want to get in the gym, guess what? You got a dad with a key. Let's go. But I'm never going to say, let's go to the gym. And so really, really lucky that he was very driven.
Yeah.
Had great mentors outside of me with Team Griffin and Rod Thompson and the twins, Dwayne and Darnell were huge to Chase. We owe them so much. And so were there things I would do differently? Sure. But I'm so thankful for every day that I got to. That gave me 2 hours more a day with my son.
Yeah, man.
Which is pretty cool.
That's pretty awesome.
Yeah.
Well, you answered another question I had was, who did he ride home with after the games, you or Mom?
Well, he would always, till he could drive, he would ride with me just because I was sticking around, and he may want to shoot free throws, or he may want to shoot even after a game,
mm-hmm.
or he would want to, you know, just hang around. And so if he rode home with Mom, I knew that he was kind of really down or mad. But, you know, we look back and we talk about it now, and we've stayed pretty true to leaving basketball here and being at home, just being at home.
That's awesome, man. Sounds like you found the balance there.
I tried.
Which is a good segue, because I want to ask about balance in another way. Okay, so your day job, for lack of a better description, you're an administrator, right? One of the principals here at Jinx?
No longer a principal.
No longer? Okay.
I'm an administrator with our community education.
Okay.
And so when I came back to coach in 2017, I just thought principal, head coach, and NFL was going to be way too much.
Yeah.
So I stepped down from being a principal and moved into another administrative role.
In that administrative role, on top of being the head of one of the most successful programs in the state at any level, and you're an NFL official, as you mentioned, how?
I tell you, man, my wife is phenomenal.
Yeah.
You know, and then it doesn't work. It would not have worked unless home's on board.
Right.
School's on board. And your staff's on board.
Mm-hmm.
And Jinx has been so good to me with this journey. And when I got hired in the NFL, being so supportive. And the staff, I can't say enough about the basketball staff I've been fortunate enough to work with, because, you know, 3 of the 5 of us were together for, 17 of my 18 years as head coach.
That just doesn't happen, man.
No. And so when I was gone, as this journey was going, when I was gone, it didn't matter. Those guys would run the show. We didn't drop off. We didn't lose anything. And so the staff was on board and so supportive. And then Shannon's just been an angel through this whole journey.
Yeah, man. So how long have you been a football official, let alone an NFL official?
I started officiating football in 2005.
Okay.
And Shannon, Chase would have been 2, Mackenzie 4, getting ready to turn 5, and she wanted to stay at home with our kids.
Okay.
You know, she had a stay-at-home mom, I had a stay-at-home mom, and I said, you know what, babe, that sounds great, but how we go? You know, I'm a 3rd, 4th year teacher in Oklahoma here, and so I always had a little bit of a side job. Like I worked a summer at Southern Hills on the landscaping crew, and anything to make a little extra money. And so I got into high school, the local association, and my goal, Aaron, was to make $2,400.
Really?
Like if I could make $2,400 and put $200 in an envelope for every month, man, we would be rich. Like,
yeah.
There's birthday party present money. There's eating out money. And it was just a way to help keep Shannon at home. And I just got a lucky break. I started in 2005, and in 2007, I was noticed by Conference USA at a TU spring scrimmage, and they hired me in Division I after 2 years. And so I called my first Division I game in 2007, and was on a split. I got like 2 or 3 games, still did high school.
Sure.
Second year, got 4 or 5 games, still did high school. Third year of Division I, I was on a crew, and that's when I gave up high school. And so, from there, I was still head coach at Jinx.
Yeah.
Calling in Conference USA as a line judge. So I would miss a lot of Friday practices because in college, games are on Saturday.
Sure.
So I'd leave on Friday. And I was in Conference USA all the way up to 2015 when I got the call.
Man, like, of course that sounds like a grind, but it sounds like super fascinating, man. How are you having these conversations with your powers that be at this time? Like, hey, listen, I'm here, no doubt, but also got this right here. How can y'all accommodate that? What does that conversation look like?
I think it was just like we talked about earlier, being truthful and honest. Like, Clay, we're behind you, but here's the type of leave you have to take. Like, you can't take a sick day to go work a football game.
Gotcha.
It's how do you handle things the right way. And I think, I never miss games. So I missed some Friday practices, but in my whole career, I only missed 2 games due to football at any level. And so very lucky in that regard. And we won both games I was gone. So that helped.
That's a better look.
But just putting everything on the table, like, I want to be here. I'm all in, but this got this other opportunity, and it's starting to bring home a little bacon, and I love it. And
please don't make me choose.
Yeah. But just was in Conference USA, and just great mentor in Gerald Austin, who was an NFL referee himself for 25 years, and gave me a shot early on, and really navigated this process for me.
I think we all were groomed by somebody in the beginning of our coaching profession. Who groomed you as an official from the beginning? Or did you just get better?
No, I think I was so fortunate when I joined the local association. Harold Allspaw, who still officiates high school football. Don Thomas is a legend who's now passed. Charlie Meyer, who goes by the King of Jinx, was a longtime football, basketball, who really is the one that kind of got me into it.
Right.
But what I found out early on, which I thought was so cool in a cutthroat world, is these people want to see you succeed. Like, they were excited when I got hired at Division I so quick. And I'm sure there's jealousy, and like, I'm jealous of other things, but in the reality is they were behind me. They had my back, and they were helping me. And then Mr. Austin, once I got hired, just took me and started that process.
With juggling all of that, what does a Monday through Friday, or better, a Sunday through Saturday look like for old Clay Martin, man?
Right now?
Oh, yeah, in totality.
Oh man. I'll kind of work from reverse, I think is probably the easy way to do it. So when I finish a football game on Sunday, we get to the plane, I start working. I've got the thumb drive I've got the TV copy that I'm able to watch. We leave the stadium with the TV copy. So I start that work for my crew as a referee right then on the airplane. I'm evaluating our game. I'm making notes. Monday and Tuesday are all with the crew in New York, and we're going back and forth on evaluations, things that were good, things that we need to do better. And that could be getting up at 4:30 or 5 to work before coming to Jinx. That could mean working after I get home from Jinx because they're long. And, Wednesday, I finalized the report with New York on our evaluations. Thursday, I start prepping for next week's game, whatever 2 teams we have. I've got, we're blessed with film in the NFL.
Yeah.
So that preparation starts. And so I'm starting to make playlists for our crew for those teams. And so it's a 7-day-a-week deal, for a lot of the year. And, but I knew that when I signed up to coach again, I knew what I was getting into.
For sure.
And then obviously when, the kids were younger, traveling on Friday and working on Saturday, not being a good dad.
Right. Not being as present as you'd want to be, right?
Missing soccer games, missing football games, missing, and just having to ask yourself, God, is this right? But I think this happened for me when my kids were so young. They kind of knew that's what Dad was. He would be away on the weekends, and at least that's how I justified it. I think still one day when I stand before my Maker, I'll be like, did I miss out on so many Saturdays with my kids?
Gotcha.
Yeah.
How would you say your relationship is now with both your son and your daughter,
Awesome.
Mackenzie and Chase?
Awesome. Oh,
That's
yeah.
beautiful, man.
Mackenzie's a senior. She's a senior at Belmont University this year. She's getting ready to graduate.
Wow.
And is thriving. And, obviously working. Chase grew up in the gym. So as soon as he could truly walk, Shannon would drive him up here at 150 every day, and he would just run in and stay with me at practice.
There you go.
So that bonding began early on, and it's really neat, because now, both of our kids are not close. Mackenzie's in Nashville, Chase is in Spartanburg, South Carolina, 14, 15 hours away, and to see them doing okay, being good people, that gives you a little bit of peace.
I got you. Okay, so coming down the finish line here, what are some of the things that you do to decompress whenever you do have a moment to yourself where you can sort of flip the off switch in your brain where you don't have any duties calling your name? How do you do? How do you come down?
Prayer is great. Music is great.
Love it.
I started listening to Christian music probably 10 or 12 years ago, and I love praise and worship, man. That's my thing now. Slow music,
for sure,
I'm into. I'm a little bit older than you, but the old school stuff, Joe DeC.
I mean, that's my all-time favorite R&B group. Come on now.
They're pretty dang good.
I had that on in the weight room the other day.
I still got LL, back in the day.
Come on now.
Music is good. I probably should read a little bit more than I do outside of the Bible or things, but just reading books. I'm reading a book right now called Be Where Your Feet Are. I heard Mike Boynton recommend it, by Scott O'Neill. Reading that right now. But for me, life has been so hectic for so long. Mm-hmm. Just sitting down in the lazy boy is nice.
Yeah.
With nothing on.
All right.
And just sitting there in the quiet.
Not
pretty good. It's pretty nice.
I love that, man. So the next question was gonna be hobbies, but you just not, check that box right there too, Coach.
Well, I love the yard.
Oh yeah.
Oh, I love the
That's
yard.
Your piece, huh?
I'm not handy. My dad could fix anything and everything, and I got none of it. Nor did I seek to get it. But I love being in the grass and in flowers, and that's a hobby, and it's therapy, and so that would be probably my only hobby outside of football.
I love that. Here's how we'll close it. We call this one the all due disrespect segment.
Okay, man.
Meaning, if you can go back in the archives in a game that you played in or coached in, specifically I'm interested in as a coach, a game that you lost, that y'all had no business losing, and you felt that way then, you still feel that way today, and if you could go back and run it back, you go right to it. Who beat you that shouldn't have beat you?
Gee, Merry Christmas, man. I tell you what, there, early on, there's so many losses that can happen. I tell you, the one that sticks in my craw, and it shouldn't because they were good, was the first time I had ever experienced losing in the first round of regionals. I had never done that.
I'm so scared of that to this day. I haven't done it yet.
I have never done that, and we lost to Booker T, which tells you, what do you mean Booker T? That's not, they were good, but we lost to them in a first-round regional game, an 8-9 game, and we led them for 31 minutes and like 30 seconds. And Kevin Sims, corner 3, hurt us. And it wasn't, so I don't know if I answered your question because Booker T's so dang good, so it wasn't a disrespectful thing. It was, we had the lead for that long, and I had no idea what to say to those kids because I had never experienced that as a player or as a coach to that point.
It was a first for all of y'all.
Yes, sir.
Oh, my goodness.
That one was tough.
What do you do with yourself after that? Because, some people would duck off and like, I don't want to be around basketball at all. You're not going to catch me at the area or the state and none of that. How did you deal?
I have always tried to handle it in a way where I show a little bit of composure in class. Yeah. Probably always didn't do that.
Right.
But I did shut down for probably that next week. Like I did not go to area games. It was how do we navigate through this? Tough conversations. Haven't had these types of exit meetings yet.
Yeah.
But, putting on your big boy pants and wanting to go support your friends who are still playing, your colleagues that are still playing, I thought was important. But, man, it was tough for that first week, no doubt.
That's always my favorite question because, I'm always talking to people who have had a ton of success, yourself included, but it's just something about those moments where we weren't successful. You just never forget them, man.
No doubt.
But listen, I'm very appreciative of your time. It's the first real, true, in-depth conversation I've gotten to have with you, and I enjoyed every bit of it. So I'm wishing you luck moving forward, even though you don't need it from me. But just keep doing what you're doing, man.
Thank you. Appreciate all you do.
All right now. Coach.